So is that just a coincidence? The name? Synchronicity, right. There are no mistakes in this vast universe. That's wonderful. Anyway, without further ado, Moray King, please.
Thank you very much, Mitchell. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Jerome asked me, I had too many slides, and he asked me, can you do a plasma presentation because Tom Vallone just wasn't able to make it? So I guess I owe thanks to Tom Vallone, I get to give the double presentation, because what I'm talking about is mainly a plasma effect. From the water, from the Brown's gas in the water, there's a secondary gas which is producing essentially a miracle from the water. Because in there, in the secondary gas, it takes the form of a cluster, a torus form, that when it goes into the internal combustion engine, and that piston is up top dead center, and you hit it with a pulse, you create a vortex ring plasmoid that exhibits anomalous force, anomalous energy, and anomalous acceleration, like a miniature flying saucer propulsion that shoves the piston down. Very different model than just heating air and moving it. And so thus, it is really a pulse plasma phenomena that I will be talking about. We have the first slide, please. Okay. How can a car run on water? Explaining that is a lot like telling the story about the Irishman who was leaving the pub. Hey, it's possible. To discover new energy, we must first accept the possibility that it could exist. Otherwise, we will just not look. And we will ridicule those who do. And we see many examples in science. The Wright brothers. Recently, the Pons and Fleischmann and cold fusion. I believe the biggest travesty in the history of science was Boltzmann's constant. Because the scientific community at the time refused to accept his theories of statistical thermodynamics. And he was so distraught and so depressed over this rejection that he actually committed suicide. At least they named a constant after him. Now, Jerome gave me some extra time, and I made up a joke all by myself. But my wife, she says, you shouldn't tell it. But I think you guys could handle it. Should I tell it? Yeah. All right. Well, I'll just recall it. Yes, I remember. If it turns out that the powers that be, because my ideas on zero-point energy are just so good, that the powers that be just can't stand it anymore, and they send the men in black to whack me, and if, I have to recall the joke, if it turns out a few years down the road, the ideas were on the right track, and you have your free energy machines and your flying saucers and whatnot, and if you choose to honor me, I have one request. Don't name me for a constant. It's much too static for my taste. I prefer something a little more dynamic, say a nonlinear function. Moray of X. I like the sound of that. It's not only does it sound like you're honoring me, but my home planet, Planet X. All right, I'll tell my wife. She says, don't clap, it just encourages me. Well, we hear on the web, every few years there's an announcement, there's cars that run on water. This recent one is from Pakistan. And the reason it made press is because the leadership in Pakistan got on board and said, man, we got to really support this. Of course, the physicists in Pakistan said, hey, it violates the laws of thermodynamics. I just love what the reporter said. Why all the whining about violating the laws of thermodynamics? Tell me one law in Pakistan that has not been violated. That's why they're ahead of us. If you see that, Daniel Dangle in the Philippines, had it for years, getting no traction with the adults. So he started up a summer camp for kids. At least I'll teach the kids how to make water cars. Steve Ryan in New Zealand's famous because he made a motorcycle run on water, and he made it to 60 minutes. That's what made him famous. In Japan, they have gene packs, made this car run on water. Let's play the video. It's a short video clip.
With oil prices soaring and fuel protests spreading across the globe, it almost sounds too good to be true. A car that runs on nothing but water. And all kinds of water will do. River, rain or sea, they all make this car mobile. Even tea works. Japanese company Gene Packs unveiled the eco-friendly vehicle in Osaka. Once water is poured into the car's tank, an energy generator takes hydrogen from the water, releasing electrons that power the car.
The main characteristic of this car is that no external input is needed. The car will continue to run for as long as you have a bottle of water inside for you to add from time to time.
According to Gene Packs, a litre of water will keep the car running at a speed of 80 kilometers for around an hour. The company hopes to go into mass production with a Japanese manufacturer. With car users around the world looking for alternative fuels to power their vehicles, Gene Packs may well have the solution they've been looking for. Michelle Kalal-Al-Khoury, Reuters.
Well, that's a weeny little car. Us inventors in America prefer something a little more macho. Play the video, please. It even cleans your environment. I like to show the video clip of Denny Klein because it very quickly summarizes the properties of Brown's gas. So let's play this video.
Turn the machine on. Denny Klein fires up his hot new invention. His machine emits a flame that feels only slightly warm to the touch. But watch what happens when he touches anything else.
Instantaneously, I can burn a hole right down through the center of that brick.
The flame instantly turns hotter than the surface of the sun. Heat so intense it takes only seconds to literally burn a hole through charcoal. 3 seconds turns a brass ball to glowing liquid metal. Tungsten lights up like a sparkler. Steel, lead, and other metals slices on contact. Yet the tip of the welder stays cool to the touch.
No other gas will do this.
Denny Klein uses an alternative fuel source once thought impossible. He says people still have trouble believing him when he reveals his liquid fuel.
Water. Take water and electricity, and we break it down through our very unique electrolysis process.
Klein has just patented his process of converting H2O to HHO, producing a gas that combines the atomic power of hydrogen with the chemical stability of water.
It turns right back to water. You can see the water running off of this.
Klein originally designed his water-burning engine for cutting metal. He thought his invention would replace volatile acetylene in welding factories. Then one day, as he drove to his laboratory in Clearwater, he thought of another way to burn his HHO gas.
On a 100-mile trip, we use about 4 ounces of water.
Klein says his prototype 1994 Ford Escort can travel exclusively on water. though he currently has it rigged to run as a water and gasoline hybrid.
Simply speaking, it can change the world by reducing our dependence on fossil fuels.
These are equivalent to our...
Pete Dominici is helping Klein take his hydrogen technology patents from a two-room office in Clearwater to consumer markets around the world.
You know what? Microsoft came out of nowhere, came out of the garage. Why not hydrogen technologies?
The duo is already in negotiations with one U.S. automaker and the U.S. government. Their plans have grown from basic welding with water to powering the entire world from the safest and cleanest fuel on Earth. Craig Patrick, Fox News.
Members of Congress recently invited Denny Klein to Washington to demonstrate his technology. Now his company is currently developing a Hummer for the U.S. military that can run on both water and gasoline. So far, his water-powered engines have passed all performance safety inspections, so all systems appear to be go right now, and gives new meaning to the term running water.
You just have to hope that water prices don't go up like
Oh, go ahead. It's Denny Klein. These water electrolyzer projects are extremely popular. There's websites all over where there's blogs and everything else where people are sharing information. Which way do I point it? Okay. On YouTube, there's over 41,000 videos posted. Down in Florida, twice a year, they have a big tent and everybody comes out and shows off all their wares and their experiments. March Labs, there's commercial units for sale. Very popular, the dry cell kits where they use gaskets to separate the plates. The Anton cell out of Germany is very good. It has a very tight gap, 1 millimeter. We'll see why that's important later. It also allows you to feed the water in from the bottom, and we'll see why that's important for circulation experiments. Sterling Allen made this video for me 5 years ago. This was part of the advertising that was put for did you all see it? Who hasn't seen it? You guys want to see it again? All right, let's play it.
Can water provide the fuel of the future? While academia has been spurning the topic, hundreds if not thousands of hobbyists and independent investigators worldwide are working on various electrolysis-like projects which put out more energy than was required to run the electrolysis unit. These pursuits go by various names such as Brown's gas and water fuel cells, and have various heroes such as the late Stanley Meyer and more recently John Kansas, who is burning salt water using radio frequencies. A number of commercial interests are involved in the research and development of the various approaches as well. The famous 19th century scientist Michael Faraday defined the limit of output energy possible in any standard electrolysis scenario. It is well known in thermodynamics that it takes more energy to dissociate water into hydrogen and oxygen than can be returned when the hydrogen is burned. But these rogue experimenters of today are reporting output from their setups that exceed Faraday's limit many times over, claiming 7 times, 10 times, or even more, producing as much as 1 liter of gas per hour using just a half a watt of electricity. The factors that seem to contribute to these effects include using a large number of stainless plates close together, the plates rough to facilitate releasing the bubbles, driving the cell using square waves, pulsed DC at kilohertz frequencies, and constantly modifying the frequency to optimize gas production. Moray King, who has published 3 seminal books on zero-point energy, recently put forth a scientific model in which he suggests that the excess energy being observed in these unusual electrolysis setups comes from the zero-point energy by producing charged water gas clusters, which somehow achieve a self-organizing criticality that coherently activates and absorbs zero-point energy. The experimental setups are typically rather simple, which is leading to a proliferation of the number of people reproducing and working to improve the effect and its consistency to the point where it can be used to serve as a practical primary energy source, an energy generator that could operate anywhere there is water. Zero-point energy is everywhere in the universe. It is the foundation of the fabric of space. Other groups, such as Exogen Technologies, are using these processes to purify water. These energy sources could actually produce culinary water as a byproduct. The day of water power via zero-point energy is arriving. Welcome to the future.
Thank you, Sterling Allen. He made that video 5 years ago. There's lots of names for the gas, but the common names are Brown's gas because he was the first to notice the energetic anomalies. He thought maybe it was atomic hydrogen and oxygen. That's what HHO stands for. Another name's hydroxy. The formal chemical name is oxyhydrogen. This is what most people believe is Brown's gas. However, there's a secondary gas present. And some of the inventors that discovered the secondary gas named them after themselves. Charged water gas clusters is what I called it. Electrical expanded water is what George Weissman called it. And he made this announcement in the 90s, so I credit him for being the first to discover this. Omasa in Japan, likewise, has a clever way of making this pure secondary gas. And SG gas is Seward and Gorley down in Florida, same town as Denny Klein, also noted there's a secondary gas present, and they have a technique for harvesting it. Nearly everyone believes the energy is from hydrogen. But electrolysis can't produce excess energy. It simply costs you more energy when you burn the hydrogen, it costs you more energy to separate the water than you ever get back when you burn the hydrogen. The real big reason why you can't do it by burning hydrogen is because the internal combustion engine is so inefficient. It's about 20% efficient. You inject the fuel with air, you ignite the fuel, it heats the air, the heat expands the piston, and most of the energy gets wasted as heat. So if it's not burning hydrogen behind these devices, what is the energy source? Well, we're going to cover these breakthrough ideas. The first one is that the zero-point energy itself exists. And would you believe that most of the standard engineering community does not know this? It was not in their textbook, and they get off right there. They just cannot believe that there's actually an energy present in the fabric of space. And the physicists get off on this one. Self-organization can occur. I mean, you can have coherence occurring in this zero-point energy. They just can't believe that that could possibly exist. So the physicists get off. However, when this self-organization occurs, it occurs in these pulse plasma events. And the zero-point energy forms up into these vortex ring plasma forms called plasmoids. And these exhibit the anomalous energy. And they exhibit anomalous force. And furthermore, they can coherently cascade into bigger plasmoids or vortex forms. If they get caught up in a vortex, they can energize the vortex itself. The energetic matter that's in a torus form, that's symmetrical like that, in a somewhat of high energy state, can be converted to a plasmoid when it's abruptly pulsed. Here's the important point. All the energy does not have to exist in this cluster. This cluster is the template or a scaffolding or a form that when it's in the internal combustion engine and gets sparked, that's when it gets converted to a plasmoid. That's when the big energy spills into the system. That's when the anomalous force gets manifested to move the piston. We're actually moving the piston by zero-point energy. And moreover, these clusters can form in inert gas and in water. It's a miracle they can form in water because it makes the experiments so easy. And the reason I chose these electrolyzer projects for the last 5 years, or 6 years now, is because it offers the opportunity for massive replication by hobbyists. Everyone could actually successfully build a zero-point energy device if we learn how to make more of those charged water clusters. And I'll give you a clue. You cavitate the water. This makes the internal combustion engine actually an advantage instead of a disadvantage. You inject the energetic clusters, you give it the high voltage pulse, there's repulsion, there's anomalous force, and it moves the piston by a zero-point energy effect, a pulse plasma effect, moving the piston. Thus, it opens the opportunity to retrofit all the automobiles of the world to easily run on zero-point energy. What we'll see here, an archetype form that keeps repeating, the energetic torus. The recurring pattern will occur 4 times in this presentation. The collapsing cavitation bubble takes that form, from which that's a picture of it. The plasmoids, of course, are vortex rings, and they're in torus form, and the inert gas clusters, and the water gas clusters. Of course, the Thrive movement. Have you all seen this one? Yeah, everybody's seen this one. That's the latest incarnation on this. When I started in the 70s, people had this vision of toruses and everything else. I've had it, for ball lightning. It was like everybody's getting this revelation of, and I called it donuts on the brain. And it was like the good Lord was trying to turn us all into Homer Simpsons. So we'll go through these breakthrough ideas. We'll look at the zero-point energy. In the beginning, in the 18th century, everybody believed in the ether to support, there was the energetic substrate that supports the light. The Michelson and Morley experiment came along. They said we can't detect a static ether, just one form of the ether. But it made general relativity very popular, or in special relativity. However, it wasn't long before an energetic substrate was invented for physics when quantum mechanics came along. And they said there's this underlying jitter in the fabric of space. Now, it's very interesting historically that we believe in an ether in our science to 1905, where relativity becomes accepted. We think the space is empty up until 1930, which comes back in the form of energetic fluctuations. So here we have a 25-year gap in the history of science that completely dominates our beliefs today. That the engineers just don't see it. They don't believe that there's an energetic substrate. And the good news is this energy that can make these virtual pairs form up and all this activity is far, far more dynamic and far more open for energetic possibilities than that old static ether was. We really are onto a great model as for how the physicists view the vacuum. There's lots of papers in the open literature, especially in the physical review regarding zero-point energy, and it can show how quantum effects can rise from it, how the hydrogen atom can be stabilized by it, how it can be an energy source without violating thermodynamics. Thus, it's a politically very important paper. It can be the source of gravity, and an exciting paper was how it could be a source of inertia, which means that the zero-point energy is the foundation of inertia, which means that if you can make a technology that coheres the zero-point energy just a little bit, you can create an inertial drive which allows you to go under abrupt accelerations without feeling the inertial stress. Flying saucer propulsion. Basically, it's in our science. The zero-point energy is modeled like a turbulent, chaotic plasma, with electric flux entering and immediately leaving. They call it the quantum foam. This is Wheeler's model from geometrodynamics. But can self-organization be triggered in this quantum foam? At first, the answer appears to be no. It's chaotic. It's random. Random things must forever remain random. Thus, the second law of thermodynamics. But the breakthrough idea is that self-organization occurs. And this idea was given to us by Ilya Prigogine, who won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1977, showing how a system may evolve from chaos to self-organization. And the system, any system that fulfilled these 3 requirements would exhibit self-organization. The system must be nonlinear, far from equilibrium, and have an energy flux through it. Now, what's the energy flux for the zero-point energy? This diagram is very important. This is Wheeler's orthogonal flux model. That flatland slot represents 3-dimensional space. In string theory, they call it our 3-brane. And when the flux comes through incoherently, we just come straight through with random jitter. We say that's the background zero-point energy. If there's a slight tilt to it, so there's an alignment in our space, we call that the polarized vacuum. And if there's vorticity coming through it, a spiral as it comes through, that is the elementary particles. Thus, in this model, the flux of the zero-point energy, this orthogonal flux, as it spirals, stabilizes all particles in existence. It's like the flow of the stream stabilizes the whirlpool. So this was a pretty tough sell, especially to the engineers, and I had a hard time explaining it. So I once in the 80s made the hyperspace workshop, teaching higher dimensions to housewives. And what we did is we got these little cardboard slots, and we put them down on the table and looked through them, and we pretended we were flatlanders. And we had no awareness of the third dimension, and we would bounce balls, and that would represent like the wave-particle duality, and then we would see if we could tell if something was connected or not connected, and that was the idea of quantum entanglement. And guess what? They got it. And they went home to their husbands and talked about orthogonal fluxes and orthorotation of the energy and of hyperspace vortices. And the husbands would go, "Not tonight, hon, I got a headache." And what's gotten into you? Why? ZPE. ZPE for you and me. Robert Lachlan is on the same page with self-organization. He's the Nobel laureate. His thesis was everything arises from self-organization of collectives, including the laws of physics themselves. I highly recommend his book. So what are the principles for cohering the zero-point energy? Work with a highly nonlinear system like a plasma, abruptly drive it far from equilibrium with an abrupt spark or abrupt discharge, and maximize the zero-point energy interaction using ions, nuclei, and you get coherent effects with vortex forms. Conduction band electrons, that's your normal electricity running in wires, copper wires. They are effectively in thermodynamic equilibrium with the zero-point energy. Thus, we don't see very many effects of activating zero-point energy with our normal, everyday conductors and electronics. However, the nucleus of an atom shows vacuum polarization lines that converge very steeply onto the nucleus, and thus, any type of abrupt motion of nuclei is an activator, a coherent activator of zero-point energy. In this model, we can see a surge, the ion surge, how it can bend that zero-point energy a little bit in our space. This is, Tom Bearden likes to call that orthorotation, where the orthogonal flux rotates in to our three-dimensional flatland spot. So I think when our politicians in America just shout, "Drill, baby, drill," that us breakthrough energy movementeers should shout back, "Orthorotate, baby, orthorotate." Oh, please note, my wife also told me not to say that. In the experiments, even in the ion collision experiments, they see it. They call it exotic coherent vacuum states arising on quantum electrodynamics. They see it in the plasma experiments. When the ions move synchronously, they call it the ion acoustic mode of the plasma, and is known to exhibit energetic anomalies in the plasma experiments. And these anomalies are associated with self-organizational modes in the plasma. And they see large radiant energy absorption, high-frequency spikes, and runaway electrons, and anomalous heating. And this self-organization tends to be a torus form, a plasma vortex ring. The rotation around the ring, it's like a helix, a tornado closing on itself. And to make these, you need pure symmetry. So here's the breakthrough idea that those plasmoids cohere the zero-point energy. Ken Shoulders probably offers the best experimental evidence for these. He launches micron-size plasmoids with just a sharp pulse from a capacitor. It must be very sharp. And he knows the power on the capacitor, the energy on the capacitor, and he can see the damage these things do when they hit a conductor. They have craters in it. They can high melting of high melting point material like aluminum oxide. The Russians are on this, and we're describing in detail. This is Mesat's work. What happens at the tip of that electrode? This is a blow up of that tip. What happens? There's a little liquid metal protuberance just before starts to come out. And then the tip of that breaks off, that liquid metal. And it's that symmetry of that tip breaking off that creates the symmetrical vortex ring flow. So Ken Shoulders went ahead and coated his electrodes with liquid metal so he could replenish the tip to make the pure EV launcher. And he called it EV, was Latin for electron validum, strong charge, because he saw a tremendous amount of what seemed to be a lot of charge present in these things. And later on, when he got convinced that there was a zero-point energy effect, he called them exotic vacuum objects. And they contain about 100 million electrons, 100,000 ions. The charge to mass ratio always seems to settle in about at the electron, and of course, they contain excessive energy. He's seen chains. They tend to form into chains and clumps. He's seen positive EVs. And this is interesting because when they strike a conductor and decay away and give back their pulse, he sees no 1/2 MeV gamma rays at all. So that means they are not comprised of positrons. Instead, he's on the fundamental mechanism of self-organization of manifesting charge from the vacuum itself. And he believes he's on a very fundamental discovery of how to manifest self-organization from the vacuum in general. They form pairs, just like pair production. You can see them spiraling around each other. The black EV is very important. They can go quiet. They still exist in a metastable state. This is very important when we talk about the nature of the water cluster, because they don't have to have all the energy being manifested, and a small pulse can reactivate them. We'll be revisiting that idea. So basically, these are the anomalies. They can adhere to dielectrics like ball lightning. Many can clump in a necklace formation. They bore holes in high melting point ceramics. And they disrupt the electron bonds of the metal they hit. It is not heat that is disrupting the bonds. It's something more coherent. It's like the bonds just let go. And there's experiments showing element transmutation. And if you transmute radioactivity, you have a possibility for technology of radioactive remediation. There's a whole other presentation based on that very topic that, by the way, at the end, I'll tell you how to download it. So the breakthrough idea, second, is that the clusters can combine coherently to create even greater effects. And this happens in vortex flow and in vortex ring flow. So Ken has done experiments where he can cascade these EVs. One EV tends to launch the next, and if he has a chain of them, he can make large plasmoid forms that are they're centimeter in size. He hates working with them because when they hit the conductor, they put out such a big EMP, he fries all his electronic equipment in his lab. So he'll say, I'm staying away from those, I'll just study the small ones. He has one of the biggest force anomalies by just pre-making a vortex of water and shooting an EV right down it, right down the vortex. He says, you would not believe the force that he gets from this event. So the energetic vortex can cohere the zero-point energy when it's large, like a plasma vortex, because the ions in the plasma can cohere the zero-point energy if they take a vortex form. And it's like we are entraining the ether to follow the vortex. That's it. And so we see this type of thing in tornadoes. Here's an example of plasmas in the lab and comparing them to a tornado. So you can envision not only tornadoes, but lightning bolts could possibly have their big energy sourced from the zero-point energy itself. Yes. Every few years you hear about a vortex device, a plasma vortex free energy machine. These are some of the fastest that get suppressed. They're a flash in the pan every time they come up. You're lucky to even hear about them. So here's the breakthrough idea. Energetic clusters can also exist in inert gas. Now the beauty of inert gas is it does not combine chemically. There's no combustion with oxygen. It offers pure experiments to study these anomalies of pulse plasma anomalies with energetic clusters. And would you believe it? The inert gases, when you spark them a lot, don't just come back down as separate. They form into clusters, especially if there's a mixture. And they seem to have this energetic form like those black EVs. So when you hit them with a laser, and they've done this in the laboratory, you see this anomalous explosive force. And they studied the formation of the cluster, and it tends to have symmetry to it. And the symmetry is very important because what we're trying for when we pulse it is to get that vortex ring. And of course, the famous PAP engine was based on that. I highly recommend Eugene Maloff's issue 51 of Infinite Energy. It was completely dedicated to a number of projects associated with exploring the PAP engine. And one of the things interesting about the PAP engine is notice the cylinder itself. When it closes, you'll see a vortex ring flow as the cylinder closes of the plasma itself. And so when they pulse it, they made a giant, large plasmoid, a plasmoid that's large, that was comprised of the small energetic clusters in the inert gas. And he keeps them energized in the PAP engine because he uses some radioactive material to keep things in a high energy state. And there's replications on the web. Various hobbyists and inventors are doing these experiments showing they have a lot of force on these abrupt plasma events. And a lot of them, they didn't even get to the point of making the inert gas clusters. And if they do, I'm sure they'll see much bigger effects than just simply doing the sparking and working with just single gases. What PAP stresses, you had to do a lot of pre-sparking on the mixture first in order to have the high energetic clusters. So the hobbyists have yet to even explore this bigger anomaly that PAP has discovered. There's rust grease is another replication. It's really fun because they're sharing as open source on the web. They're sharing everything they learn. Here's an interesting one. Samander Cinch cut some grooves in the cylinder of just a normal internal combustion engine, and they're all puzzled. Gee, why is that help? Right? It seems that you get more force, more horsepower, and they're all scratching their head. Why? Well, the answer is it creates a little bit of a plasma vortex ring as the gas ignites, creating more anomalous propulsion, adding to the normal behavior of the gasoline internal combustion engine. So here's an idea. The energetic clusters can form in water. This is the real miracle because it offers easy experiments. Peter Grenou is one of the first to explore abrupt pulsing just in water. He has a chamber of water, and he does a very abrupt pulse and creates a force anomaly. And he's also was an expert in high-speed photography, and he was able to photograph the plasmoid that was produced if it was abrupt enough. And so what happens when the discharge is very abrupt, it's like a crack of lightning. There's explosive explosion that throws the weight up in the air, and he photographs how high it goes. And he says, well, I have a nice force anomaly. And by the way, I blew out my bolts. And he didn't even count that. He's blowing the damn thing apart. However, Gary Johnson of Kansas State University did a replication of this work. And what he does, he made his device, his chamber, designed to blow apart. And he could throw those weights up the guide wires, and he measures how high he throws them up. And then he knows he can measure, well, if they went that high and they're this heavy, how much energy proves he has excess energy as well as excess force from the abrupt explosion. He said, and if you don't do it abruptly enough, when you dump the capacitor, nothing happens, just a normal discharge in water. But when you do it abruptly enough, it is the crack like a lightning crack or thunder. He has to wear the big earmuffs to protect his ears when he does these experiments. It's a huge bang. Harold Aspen writes about this too. It's in the regular literature about these enormous explosive events from these pulsed ion motions in water. Here's a website that explores, hey, can we tap that to move the piston? And internal combustion engine is pretty crude because we're just working straight up with water and a very abrupt discharge. But they're exploring that. I recommend that website. And Stan Meyer's latest device is somewhat famous for trying to take advantage of this particular event. And let's play this video.
A car that runs on water instead of gasoline. Can it be true? Well, inventor Stanley Meyer made an announcement today in Colorado Springs. He says he's come up with a device that will hook up to any engine and allow it to run on good old H2O. News 13's Kurt Goff tonight on the possible impact of the water fuel cell.
Stanley Meyer says the answer to dependence on foreign oil lies all around us, in seawater, tap water, and rainwater. Any kind of H2O, he says, can power just about every type of engine. How? With the water fuel cell. It fits in the palm of his hand, but it could revolutionize the world.
You're talking about a pollution-free, totally new source of energy, the voltage dissociation of water.
The fuel cell converts water into a gas, hydrogen oxygen, which is released in the form of thermo-explosive energy.
So the water fuel injector simply replaces the spark plug. We hook it to a hydrogen computer system which regulates and meters the flow going into the injector. It processes the water in such a way to release its thermal explosive energy.
The man who invented an engine that can run on water says he's been offered $1 billion in cash by oil-producing countries to sell his patent. So far, he hasn't sold. Environmental specialist Jan Porter talked to the inventor, who thinks that the U.S. auto industry could produce cars that run on water now if they wanted to.
Our industrial base of the world is based on the utilization.
Stan Meyer has a car that runs on water, and that's drawing crowds at this year's Extraordinary Science Conference in Colorado Springs. Myers has developed what is called the water fuel cell injector. The injector breaks down the water molecule into hydrogen and oxygen, and the hydrogen is what powers the car.
Basically, all we do is replace the spark plug and replace it with the water fuel cell injectors you see right here. We simply feed ordinary non-processed water or processed water in here, and as the water goes into the injector, it hits a very high pulse voltage frequency, which instantly converts it into thermal explosive energy. And as a result, we can run this car down the road on water.
Meyer's invention was introduced in Britain earlier this month, and now the Brits have followed him here.
We recently took a scientific delegation to witness Stan's work, to really evaluate it, and came back saying, this is one of the most important inventions of the century.
Now, as most of you know, Stan Meyer's intention was, with that plug, to retrofit automobiles. And he was murdered in the 90s. I personally knew Stan. He came to my workshop on zero-point energy at a conference in the 90s, and I got to interact with him with exchanges, mail exchanges and phone calls before that. And you can go to that link and read about an investigative reporter dove in all the details surrounding his death. But basically, they were celebrating in the restaurant a verbal deal that these Belgian investors, these mysterious investors, were going to fund the project, and they poisoned him. But the good news is, Stan's brother, Steve Myers, his twin brother, he was the electrical engineer. None of the Stan Myers information is lost whatsoever. He continues to work. Unfortunately, he's reclusive and doesn't want to participate because he's really distraught over what happened. We'll look into this patent on the water injector plug. We're going to see it's really not that simple. He's injecting three things. We have injecting the water, ionized air, and argon, a rare gas. That's interesting. No, very few people know that. Why argon? Argon's used in sonoluminescence. It seems like it's helping there. There's three rings. Here's the front end. It's like a shower head, right? The water's in the middle ring. The rare gas is in the next ring. There's the outer ring, and the ionized air is on the middle ring. That mixture is pre-energized. And he has quite a bit, using lasers and his high voltage waveform and everything else to really get that thing in a high energy state. And then they hit it with a big voltage pulse inside the internal combustion engine. So when we come back, we're going to have a little short break right now. We'll look into a better way to pre-energize the gas, and that's the secondary gas of Brown's gas. And we'll look at the details of what is this gas, and why cavitation helps make more of it. And I guess we'll take a 5-minute break. Yes. 5 minutes. And
a bathroom break, really, because there's so much more to cover.
Okay, so be back in 5. Thank you very much. So what we're going to explore is the secondary gas of Brown's gas. And this allows us to pre-energize the water that we're putting in the electrolyzer and put it in this gaseous form. And Brown's gas is just not hydrogen and oxygen. The secondary gas, George Weissman called electrically expanded water, or what I call charged water gas clusters. This is the magical gas. Yul Brown is credited for discovering the energetic anomalies in the welding application, so he duly gets credit for this discovery of the gas, and it should be named after him. It manifests a cool flame, just a little bit above the boiling point of water. You can run your hand through the flame without burning it. Yes, got the touch. It doesn't boil water. And so you can see these videos at your leisure, yet it can vaporize tungsten, which is over 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit to vaporize tungsten. You'll see from these temperatures, no welding torch can vaporize tungsten. It's not hot enough. Yet this little gas that's coal can vaporize tungsten. What does this mean? It means that the energy of this gas is stored coherently. It's just like Ken's Shoulders EVs. The plasma in that welding torch is little micron-sized EVs that when they strike the metal, cause the atomic bonds just to let go. Right? That's the secret. It's the water cluster gas that turns into plasmoids when they go into the plasma form. The anomalies are similar to the EVs. That adheres to matter. It's polarized. There's this electric shock when it implodes. Instead of exploding, cool flame, yet it can vaporize tungsten. Cuts cleanly through anything. You can weld to similar materials. There's claims of neutralizing radioactive waste as well as element transmutation. Well, we'll see there's so many similarities to the charge cluster phenomena. We're on to the same thing. I highly recommend George Weissman's website. He's been researching this for years, and as a result of his work, he has really caused a lot of success in inventing communities, making the correct form of the gas, so he has a lot more of this electrically expanded water. The way they know they have a heavier than air gas is they do the balloon test. These are hobbyist type experiments. You fill up a balloon. Balloons don't hold hydrogen very well. You wait a while, the balloon drops to the ground, yet it still exhibits the balloon torch. You can even do it with a paper bag. You can carefully put the gas in the paper bag, seal it up, wait 12 hours. All the hydrogen vents away, carefully open the bag, gas still burns at the bottom of the bag. There's claims of being able to pour it from one glass to another because it's heavier than air. And George Weissman says the easiest demo is just a water bottle. Just put the gas, accumulate the gas in a water bottle, screw off the top, let the hydrogen all vent away, and show there's a gas at the bottom that still ignites, and he observes an imploding ring that as it burns down. So this leads an action item for the chemistry departments. Create the Brown's gas, vent away your hydrogen, and does that remaining residual gas burn? What is it? Right, if we can encourage just the chemistry departments to do this basic experiment, their curiosity would have to be piqued, and to say, wow, how can there be a state of water that does that? And they'll discover there's a coherent state of the water itself. Chris Ekman at Idaho State University, he was an undergraduate, talked his chemistry professor into letting him try it. So they did that, got a good electrolyzer that was known to produce a lot of the secondary gas. He vents it away, measures what he has left, sees there's very little diatomic hydrogen or atomic hydrogen. Basically found a gaseous water cluster with excess electrons. And furthermore, with thermal imaging, he confirmed the low temperature of the flame as well as its ability to sublimate tungsten. So what we found out, here's the new information, that cavitation makes this cluster gas, this water cluster gas. And this work was just announced this year from Mark LeClair of Nanospire. That's his website. And he is an expert on cavitation, and he found out that he's getting all the qualities of EV anomalies. Creates microscopic craters, it can carve trenches and high melting point ceramics, even claims of transmutation, big experiment showing the easiest transmutation experiment of all. My previous presentation this summer was completely focused on the transmutation experiment of Mark LeClair, which, by the way, I'm going to tell you how to download all my presentations at the end of this lecture. And he shows it's manifesting excess energy. So we know there's something interesting going on with sonoluminescence in water. This is ultrasonics cavitates the water. And normally when you have cavitation in the bulk of the water, the bubble is symmetric. If you mix some inert gas like argon or xenon with it, you'll see this bluish light come off. This created a lot of excitement amongst the standard scientific community because they said, wow, if the spectrum of the bluish light is thermal, represents like heat, that means we have temperatures, huge temperatures that can actually do fusion. However, Julian Schwinger, Nobel laureate, suggested that the abrupt compression of the bubble would actually induce a zero-point energy coherence, converting the zero-point energy to light. And therefore, in this phenomena, the good news is you're getting to some zero-point energy. The bad news is you're not getting that much, and you're wasting it as light. So we'd like to capture that energy. When the bubble collapses near a surface, right, the bubble starts to dimple in a torus form. And right through the donut of the torus is what's called the reentrant jet. And all the energy of the collapsing cavitation bubble gets concentrated to a nanometer scale in that reentrant jet. And there's extreme pressures as this collapse occurs. And at the tip of that reentrant jet, the pressure is over 300,000 psi down to the nanoscale. And under these pressures, water can take, and shown to take, a solid state form that Mark LeClair calls a macro-ionic water crystal. And the miracle of this crystal is at the very tip, he calls it a plasma bow shock wave. That's where the zero-point energy coherence is occurring, and its behavior is just like Ken Shoulders EVOs. Mark is able to measure imprints. This is a rust crystal. When he has microscopic photograph, he can show these imprints are very pretty of the crystal striking the material. Here's a summary of what it does. What his trick was, he lets the reentrant jet, rather than hit the plate and immediately damage it, he forms it over holes. And then it goes through the hole, and then it can strike something on the other side. And it self-accelerates, so it really builds up a lot of power. And that was the trick for his to demonstrate transmutation. He's investigated its structure. It seems to have down its tail linear water and an OH chain. Around the circumference is like a hexagon type water crystal shape. And the interesting part is the plasma bow shock wave, because that's where the zero-point energy coherence seems to be occurring. And it creates the trenches, and he has observed and measured self-acceleration up to Mach 4 as he lets this thing build up a head of steam. And Shoulders EVOs likewise observes the self-acceleration phenomena. It's like a flying saucer propulsion event. Here's a picture that Mark drew of the material. He calls it the LeClair effect, where this plasma bow shock wave, just like Shoulders EVO, when it strikes a surface, it causes transmutation. And down the chain's the linear OH chain. And is there any other experimental evidence for this chain? Well, it turns out that Chris Ekman at Idaho State University got some preliminary evidence of a linear isomer of water where there's extra electrons in the d-orbitals, and it's in a higher energy state. He did some X-ray diffraction studies, and there's some papers that he wrote suggesting that this form could exist. He had some help with a plasma physicist to show that it can exist, but the problem is, as a lone molecule, it's simply not stable. It just immediately collapses back to normal water. However, if it participates in a cluster, especially if that chain can close into a loop, which Mark LeClair has recorded, that those chains can close into loops. If that loop is at a sub-micron size, where it can be somewhat stable. It's light enough to be a gas. It's not, and it will start to come out of the water. And if these electrons are up at the d-orbitals, this is very similar to Rydberg matter, that the cluster itself is in this torus form, this metastable torus form, that fulfills everybody's model. Foster Gamble's model of the torus form, George Weissman's model of electrically expanded water, and of course, Chris Ekman's model of linear water. So everybody, this could be it. This is the magical form of the secondary gas. When this is hit with a pulse, electrical pulse, sparking in the internal combustion engine, it converts right into the plasmoid. And it's the plasmoid in the cylinder of the internal combustion engine that drives that piston. There's the magic. That's the miracle in the water. Many successful inventors and inventions cavitate the water inadvertently. They didn't know they were trying for it, but we'll see that the characteristics of their inventions that seem to do really well in making excess gas and seem to have excess energy were the results of cavitation. And there's lots of ways to cavitate. The most common way is just make some electrolysis gas in very narrow gaps in the electrolyzer, and that naturally bubbles and cavitates the water. Pulling a Venturi vacuum does it, blowing air through the electrolyzer does it, oscillating electromagnetic fields, any type of field oscillation, because the water's charged, they'll oscillate with the field, that'll churn the water. Any vibration, mechanical vibrations, sonic, ultrasonic vibrations like they do in sonoluminescence, all of this cavitates the water. Of course, you can just work with a straight-up cavitating pump, just cut to the chase. Well, look at examples of each of these. The electrolysis gas in the narrow gap is the most common way the electrolyzers produce it. A lot of people know on the web that for some reason, these very narrow gaps seem to produce a lot more gas, and it has nothing to do with electrolysis because it wouldn't matter. Your spacing doesn't matter for electrolysis. And I think Paul Zagouras has one of the simplest configurations for making the plates, because he makes rough plates. The gap is extremely narrow. He's at 0.6 millimeters. He stressed that to make these plates, he used a sandblaster or a media blaster. It had to be at 45 degrees to make these sharp lip craters on the surface. So it was very, very sharp. I avoided all the conditioning things that you read about on the web. You could just make plates like that were very effective. Here's a picture of a sandblaster. He sold some kits on the web. Walter McNichols put up some YouTubes. I think he sold about 7 of them before he got shut down. There's a suppression story about him, as well as his experiments with cars. So you can read about it on the web. And he also, he pulled a Venturi vacuum. As he pulled the water through that electrolyzer, it would immediately go in the gas. They could feed to the engine. Blowing air can churn it all up. And Archie Blue is famous. There's a patent in the 70s. There's stories about him running a car on it. He just would blow the air through the electrolyzer. And so that also caused turbulence and cavitation. Now, mechanical vibration. This is probably, OMASA probably is one of the best projects for making the pure water cluster gas. What he does is he uses these mechanical paddles that he jerks. He's only running them at 100 hertz, but he jerks them, and if you jerk fast enough underwater with that paddle, it pulls a little bit of vacuum behind the paddle, which makes the cavitation bubbles. And then he runs an electrolyzer, and he makes this pure gas that he stores. He can even store it under pressure, but this is very important. When he does so, his containment leaks hydrogen. He will not contain hydrogen if he has any residual hydrogen. He will simply let that leak away, but he can store under pressure this water gas, and 2 years later, he's gone for as much as 2 years, continue to use it to show it still exhibits the anomalies of Brown's gas. And I think because of the significance of this work, this video is very valuable especially to the researchers. It is spoken in Japanese, but they have English subtitles. And so we could play this video, and I think it's seminal. It's highly significant.
東京大田区のプラントメーカー、日本テクノ。
日本テクノの大政社長が開発したこの攪拌機。従来のようなプロペラが回転するものではなく、低周波の振動で攪拌する。中の水は安定して循環するという。洗剤を入れても泡が全く立たない。一体なぜか。通常電気分解すると酸素と水素が発生する。しかし大政社長が過去にこの攪拌機を使ってメッキをしたところ、難点とされる大きな泡や水素の爆発が発生しなかった。
振動が伝わっているために表面張力が壊れてですね、泡が形成しようとっても壊れちゃうんですね。だから泡は作りたくても作れない状態がこの現象じゃないかというふうに言われてるんですね。
これをヒントにした大政社長、水に電気を流すと白い煙のようなものが。これは酸水素ガス。普通の電気分解だと水素と酸素のガスが別々に出てくる。このガスは振動攪拌機でないと得られない。
酸素と水素のガスがですね、元素がナノマイクロバブルになって出るところが従来のですね電気分解と全く違うんですね。そして安全な酸素と水素の私の考えでは結合体のガスが得られると。
水素ガスは分子が細かいため容器などに保存しても漏れやすい。しかしこのガスは2年近く同じ圧力で保存されている。大政社長は酸素と水素2つの分子が結合し特殊な構造を作っているからだと考える。ガスの用途はまずバーナーの燃料だ。温度はおよそ700度で火の中では低い方だが、鉄板を切断できるほどのエネルギーに変わるという。さらに新たな用途も生まれようとしている。東京海洋大学の伊藤教授、7月に酸水素ガスを用いてある実験を成功させた。タンクに溜めた酸水素ガスを燃料に小型エンジンを動かすことができた。空気の取り込み口は塞いでいる。ガスの中に酸素があるため燃焼時に空気中の酸素が必要ないからだ。水からできた燃料のため燃焼後はまた水に戻り、有害な排ガスは発生しないという。
別に非常に安定な圧力を加えても爆発しないし、インフラとして整備して自由に給油と同じように給ガスができるような状況が作れれば、自動車の燃料として置き換わる可能性というのは十分にあって、
ガスの正体を調べようと大政社長は液化を試みた。酸素はマイナス183度、水素はマイナス253度で液化するが、このガスはおよそマイナス178度で液化した。
構造はわからないにしても、新しい、地球上で水の第二の水ができた。エンジンとか発電機だとか今化石燃料に変わるものが水から作れてまた水に戻るというふうに、究極のね、地球を救うね、燃料ですよね。全ての燃料にしたいと。
解明できていない部分が多い酸水素ガスだが、大きな可能性を秘めている。
Well, you're stunned. Don't you speak Japanese? We can also cavitate the water with oscillating electric fields and pulse waveforms. Exogen is a good example of that. And I like Exogen because they have an interesting story. Their inventor, primary inventor, was Stephen Barry Chambers. Stephen Barry Chambers' sister is named Marilyn Chambers, who happened to be the wife of Stan Meyer. Shortly after Stan Meyer's death, She carted up all the plans, went up to her brother, electrical engineer, and they founded Exogen. And this was the patent they produced. These 3 patents are actually identical. And I looked at the patent, and I said, what's different about that compared to all the other patents I see on the gas? And they had one interesting thing different. They put a toroidal coil under the water. And I was going, what's the purpose of that? Well, after investigating, it turns out that an oscillating toroidal coil surrounds itself with an oscillating electrical field in a torus shape. The gas is charged, as we're talking, charged water cluster gas. It will cause the water to go into turbulence following the oscillating electric field. So there was an example of that. And that's how he did it. Of course, sonic and ultrasonic excitation is very common. And there's a fascinating project on the web that intrigues me, because he uses an ultrasonic water fogger, and the inventor is anonymous. He's anomalously anonymous. He goes by the handle the power to be. It looks like he took advantage of something that was studied at the University of Michigan, which is what happens when you vibrate the zinc oxide crystals. Right? These crystals are small, form about a micron. They're piezoelectrics. And gas comes off of this. And of course, everybody thinks the gas is hydrogen, because after all, if it comes out of an electrolyzer and burns, what else could it be? That's what. But here, there's no electrolyzer involved. It's just having these crystals. You have to keep them in a wettable envelope so they just don't get sloshed all away. This is just freely up on the web for people to investigate. And it's absolutely intriguing, because here this might be the easiest way to make this secondary gas. Circulating the water is another great idea, because you can both cavitate it and charge it by electrostatic rubbing, which means you don't have to feed current into the system. After all, we're not trying to make hydrogen here. We're not trying to do electrolysis. We're just trying to electrically stimulate the water. But why not just stimulate it like with electrostatic rubbing? This idea comes from TV from Vinslick, a seminal paper called Bubbles and Steam Electricity. It's up on the web. In one paper, it explains how steam electricity, waterfall ionization, luminescence, and thunderclouds charge separation all occur from the zero-point energy. This idea, we mimic the dynamics of a thundercloud. In a thundercloud, small ice crystals called grappa are blown up and comes down as rain. You can see this circulating in the thundercloud, how we build up charge. It's just like a Van de Graaff generator. As we circulate the dielectric band, we transfer charge from the combs. So in this idea, the electrolyzer, the water in the electrolyzer that's distilled water, acts like the dielectric belt, and the rough conductive plates act like the combs. So what we're doing is we're going to circulate the water as fast as we can and electrostatically charge it, as well as cavitate it from the circulation. So in this embodiment, the gas would be produced and it would go upward, and we keep churning the water. Another embodiment, we could use a cavitating pump itself. And when we circulate the water in the other direction, the gas that gets produced helps move the water because it wants to go upward. And don't forget the spark arresters to prevent flashback into the reservoir. And I believe this will likely be the winning embodiment, because we use a straight up pump to circulate the water very fast. And we vibrate the plates by reed cavitation. Reed meaning like the vibrations in a harmonica, where the reeds vibrate, because the plates are so close together, they vibrate like a shower massage as the water rapidly circulates. So we have everything occurring from this one embodiment. We get electrostatic rubbing, we get cavitation, we get integration of energy in the water as we circulate it over and over again. The energy content from these charged water gas clusters keep building up in the water. Right? You could even, if it's highly energized, you can even take some of that water, spray it into a carburetor, and give the illusion that water's a fuel. So here's the goal. If we really have zero-point energy, and we really can activate all of this with tremendous amount of energy in a small amount of gas, we should be able to prove that we have a new energy source by making a self-running system. And the best system to make is a genset. So we have a motor-generator combination. The generator makes the electricity that you rectify, use it to drive your electrolyzer or drive your pump if you're circulating. And if you can make such a system idle, just idle, due to the notorious inefficiency of the internal combustion engine, it would prove, a grand slam home run proof, that you're onto a new energy source. Because this is considered impossible. And yet 2 teams have recently claimed success. Before we get too excited, though, just a single claim somewhere is not sufficient, because there's lots of ways to cheat in this type of setup. Any type of hidden fuel source. You can sneak in alcohol is a very common way to cheat. Hydrocarbon on the plates, any hidden electrical source, right? And even chemical reactions. There's lots of metals that can react with water to vent hydrogen. But because these particular projects, their only motivation was to create a launch open source projects. And they wanted to share all their information on the web just to get replication. There was no request for money. So I will honor their request by saying, I don't think they were cheating. I think they were really, really trying to honestly get other people on board with these devices. I really like Steve Eaton. This came on. He joined with Jeff Sokol at Hybrid Tech. He worked with a pretty good generator. He made a self-running closed-loop system. Jeff Sokol put pictures in his ebook that within a couple months he was ordered to get them out. He didn't require a whole lot of power, like running the 6 liters per minute, only at 30 amps. And he had some excess power to run a power drill and light some bulbs. Here's some photographs from the ebook. Jeff sent me a complimentary ebook. It's a good thing I made the pictures, because it's gone. It's yanked out of the ebook. But there was a small prototype device. The electrical wiring was pretty standard for these things, and it ends up getting 4 volts across his concentric tubes. Just running it at DC, very narrow gap, 1/32 of an inch. That's highly significant. And you see the spiral. He separated his tubes by the spiral filament, like a fishing line, very, very thin. It forced the gas to spiral up the electrodes. So imagine having the gas-water mixture and its tight gap, and it's trying to spiral up, and all that rubbing's going on, and all that sputtering's going on. So he's creating a lot of turbulence inside those tubes to create more of this charged water cluster gas. He felt he had to make a big device to have all that activity go off to make the unit self-running. And had he known about the circulation trick, he may have been able to do it with the small device. Here in Germany, Oliver and Valentine went on the web, working with a very, very cheap generator. They're lucky. This thing, maybe 15% efficient. They were just hobbyists on a very low budget. They had to jerry-rig the timing and everything else, because you want to fire these things at top dead center. And they did a lot of work. And they used a very good cell, the Anton cell. It has 1 millimeter gap, which allows them to have all that turbulence inside the gap. They made a video, the Christmas video of 2010, where they put it on a little cart, and they ran the unit on an elevator, and they posted it on the web. And Stefan Hartmann made this cute video where they spliced the Apple commercial from 1984 with the video that was posted by Oliver and Valentine. And I think this really makes a cute finale for this talk. So let's play this video. In summary, zero-point energy ideas can actually be a source of energy when self-organization occurs. It typically takes the form of these plasmoids or these EVs, and the more vorticity you put on it, the more coherent it becomes. The torus form keeps repeating. Electrical discharge of a torus of matter in this metastable state takes it to the plasmoid, and it's here at this moment that the zero-point energy is activated, and we get the anomalous force and energy. And the examples are the black EVs, the inert gas clusters, and these charged water gas clusters that we can create from cavitation. The form that it takes from the cavitation, the collapsing cavitation bubble forms the reentrant jet, which squeezes that macro-ionic water crystal. That can form into a ring, providing the basis of the stable torus, and it has coherent energy. Lots of ways to cavitate. But most typically is electrolysis gas in the narrow gaps. That's where cavitation is typically done inadvertently. Blowing air through, pulling Venturi vacuum, any of the vibrations, mechanical, acoustical, or oscillating electric fields will cavitate the water. The electrolyzers, the electrodes are typically rough but clean, with tiny gaps. The more narrow, the better, because it causes turbulence, once again, cavitation. And the various electrical stimulations can be used. And we want to minimize the current because we're not trying to make hydrogen. And a good idea to get frictional charging by rubbing. So we work with distilled water in those. And when we circulate, we charge by rubbing. It helps create turbulence and cavitation. The winning embodiment is the Reed cavitation. That looks like that's going to be the winner because it does everything. And the recycling in the water keeps integrating its energy content. It makes more and more charged water gas clusters in the water. Action item, the chemistry departments make the brown gas, vent away the hydrogen. What the heck is left? What is the strange gas that continues to burn? And inventors make self-running systems, self-running gensets. You get those to idle. We have proving a new energy source. So basically, we share information. We are the breakthrough energy movement. And we are now gifting the world with a whole new energy source for all of humanity. Thank you. Now, I have a few books with me, so if you would like some books, just come up to me afterwards and we can arrange for you to get the books. This is my latest book, The Energy Machine of T. Henry Moray. By the way, if you can't get them here, I didn't bring that many. Adventures Unlimited Press is the publisher. You can go straight to them. It's really easy to remember because researching free energy is an adventure, and it's an unlimited adventure. And besides, a limited adventure is just too boring. Any questions? Now, this presentation, as well as all of my presentations, and some of them are annotated, can be downloaded today from that website. And to get to that website, all you have to do is Google 3 words, water, fuel, ZPE. And so, questions?
We're going to take 5 minutes of questions. Moray is going to be on our panel later after Judy Wood's presentation this evening. So we're going to take a few, whet your appetite about turbulent water and toruses and everything else, and then come back for the panel.
All right, we want good questions. A good question.
Do you want to? Would you repeat the question so we have it for the?
So if turbulence is disruptive, or EVs for that matter, is disruptive to metallic surfaces, would the cylinder not get damaged from this activity? Well, the answer is it might. Experimenting would have to be done, and the same is true on the PAP engine. So there might be damage. Go ahead.
Why is there chaos in a vacuum?
Yeah, well, it comes from quantum electrodynamics. It came in at the inception of when quantum theory was discovered. they found this underlying jitter to the behavior of the fabric of space itself. It was Dirac who says, it seems to be making these virtual pairs in this chaotic turbulence. And the beauty of having such turbulence is the opportunity for self-organization. So we have an energetic substrate that could yield coherent energy if you work with it in the proper way. And so, oh yeah, and by the way, this is not my ideas. The literature is loaded. The standard literature is loaded with concepts of the vacuum fluctuations. Just Google vacuum fluctuations, 0-point fluctuations, 0-point energy. This is coming from the physics community. I didn't invent it. And if I did, they would punish me.
It should be obvious that we have a jittery universe, you know?
We certainly have jittery people in it.
Another question?
Yes, Ruggero Santilli has really been contributing over the years. I've heard him at many conferences. I'm actually friends with him. He was helping Denny Klein, that we saw, to help make the patent, and they rejected the patent. And so he's mentioned in the other presentations that I've given over the years with his theory of magnacules and producing. The magnacule theory got rejected, but it was very interesting to note that the Seward and Gourley down in Clearwater, where Denny Klein is, in Clearwater, Florida, and Denny Klein and Segure were living. They were living there too, and the theory they proposed in their patent matches Ruggero Santilli's theory of magnacules. They just say, and they didn't even give him credit. You know, I recognized it right away. And on other presentations that I gave earlier years ago, their theory of magnacules was presented. And you can download those presentations from the web. An interesting thing on the Joe cell was it came out of Australia, I believe. One of the things he stressed, I have to have energized water in it. The energized water coming from the waterfalls and the things like that, which matches the bubbles and steam electricity idea, where we get the energetic water from the electrostatic rubbing. And so they could produce some effects with a straight up cell that wasn't even very narrow, but the water actually had energetic content to it. And so these ideas of circulation, we're trying to energize that water straight up. Go ahead.
Another question?
I have a comment here.
Okay, well, this opinion is the view of the engineering community. There is no 0-point fluctuations or vacuum fluctuations. It is empty. There's nothing there. So on that, I guess we'll have to have another question. I was going to say, on a happy note, let's go eat. But we need someone who's a proponent that says, no, there's energy there. What do you guys think? Who thinks there's energy there?
We have jittery vacuums around here.
And guess what? It's organized in a peculiar way, because the organization was actually from the orthogonal flux. That's why there was coherence in the appearance of chaos. Yes, and a higher dimensional universe. And so I guess we have both. From 3D, it looks microscopically chaotic. From a higher dimensional perspective, it looks like plenty of organization is there and the opportunities to tap it. On that happy note, let's go eat.
Thank you, Ilya Prigogine and Moray King. Thank you very much.